And we are live. Welcome, everybody. So we have Dunny MMA fangirl and Aussie fight fan here, shortly to be joined by Colin Crandall. We're here with the absolutely legendary Jon Fitch with us today. Jon, thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Good to be here.
Excellent. So, Jon, you've got an incredible career spanning multiple promotions. And I guess I just really wanted to start with, let's make this fun. What's your favorite fight and the favorite finish you have in your career?
Oh, the GSP fight is up there. It was a great fight. The Eric Silva fight was also very fun fight. As far as favorite finishes, the Thiago Alves upkick finish early in my UFC career, it was pretty fantastic. But I had somebody find a fight from way back when I was, it was like my third fight or something like that. And they put that up on YouTube. So it was me versus Eric Tix. I was announced as Jon French. And it was like a 10-second knockout. So that one's fresh in my mind because I saw that today for the first time in maybe 20 years.
Wow, that's amazing. We love it. Aussie.
Yeah, that's hilarious. The name call. My son had a fight in Hex FC Australia here, and his name's Harley. They called him Harry when he won his fight. So yeah, that's pretty funny. That happens sometimes.
Yeah, it was always bizarre to me because I had a number of times where they messed my name up in wrestling in college also. And I was like, how much more basic do you have to get than Jon Fitch? It's just 2 syllables. It's not a lot of letters, not too many consonants shoved together.
Yeah. So you fought BJ Penn here in Australia, and I think it was UFC 127.
Mm-hmm.
Was that your first time coming to Australia, and what did you think of that fight in general?
We did a press tour early on before fight camps kind of got kicked off. So that was the first time I got to go to Sydney and Melbourne. So that was pretty fun. And then we came back for the fights, and then oh man, where was it? I went up to the north part, and did some scuba diving around the coral reef up there, Great Barrier Reef. So it was a good trip. I had a lot of fun in Australia. The weather was great. The beaches were great. The insects were wild. We saw crazy bats when we went up there, and it was nuts. It was nuts. The scuba diving stuff was a pretty cool experience also.
It is. And we have Colin. Looks like the MMA professor is now in the house. Colin, hello.
Yes, thank you so much, Danny. I appreciate the audience. Jon Fitch, appreciate your patience and understanding so much. You are one of the guys that I've always respected most in this industry. Appreciate you understanding me being a few minutes late, brother.
Well, no worries. It happens.
So, what's that?
It happens.
I appreciate it, man. I really do. It's so good to see you here, man. So much to talk about. Now, were you guys in the middle of a question you wanted to ask? If so, I could throw it back to
Colin, you can go with a question.
If I'm up next.
Yep, over to you, Colin.
Okay. So, Jon, so much to ask. I think you last fought, what was it, about 3 years ago?
It was 4 years. I've been retired 4 years now. It was 2020. During the lockdown, crazy stuff going on there. We had all the masks and the swab testing and all that ridiculousness that everybody's just trying to pretend never happened right now. But yeah, I fought Neiman Gracie, and it was one of those fights where I was contemplating retirement since 2017 when I fought Jake Shields. I just had enough of the industry. It's not even that I wasn't physically capable of fighting anymore. It's just I wanted to take part in a sport, and the UFC's monopolization of the sport has turned it into a production. So it's more like pro wrestling and a popularity contest than it is about winning fights. And it was just frustrating, and I didn't like having to deal with it anymore. So I was kind of looking for a way out, but I couldn't leave without taking a loss first. I think, I was right there at title contention, I fought to a draw with Roy McDonald, and I believe I won that fight. I think I won 4 rounds to 1, and a lot of other people thought I won, at least 3 rounds to 2. So I couldn't walk away after that fight. So I figured if I fought one more time and I beat Gracie, next fight would probably be a title shot. So I just rolled the dice again. I didn't have a great training camp. I did most of it in my garage.
I got you. I was at that fight with Rory, and I felt you absolutely won that fight as well. I couldn't believe it, and I'm sure it's probably something you'd rather forget. But man, the judging, it just seems like all across the spectrum, whichever promotion it is in, is a problem. So let me ask you something about
the scoring. The scoring criteria is terrible. It needs to be very specific. You listen to the announcers and commentators talk about damage all the time, but the word damage never appears anywhere in the criteria. Right. So it's very bizarre that they are talking about something that isn't mentioned in the criteria. So I think that's the big problem, is it's not clear enough. The criteria isn't clear enough. With the criteria of what defines a significant strike and a strike that's moving the fight along to a finish, like there needs to be a differentiation. You should be able to take somebody off the street who's not a fight fan, have them read the rule criteria for scoring, have them watch a fight and pick the winner 99% of the time.
Yeah. I
have children who can read instructions of a board game and play that board game correctly. Like, why is that? Why is Chutes and Ladders so much easier to understand than MMA scoring?
Yeah, it really shouldn't be. A lot of people look at the people that are judging as a big part of the problem, but would you say it's 100% the criteria, or is it sometimes the people as well? It's all
criteria. It's because it leaves too much up to the individual to decide what they think. And it shouldn't be about just, I think this punch is stronger than that punch.
Yeah.
Well, they look kind of the same, and it really is objection. It's your objective view of it. Maybe you're not seeing the same thing everybody else is seeing. So there needs to be distinct explanation of what to look for.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Let me throw it to whoever's up next, Danny or Jason.
Yeah, I might go next, John. So maybe just building on that, it was very interesting recently. Dave lost it with the rankings. So he's changed the system, right? Because I think a lot of us were kind of looking, going, hang on, this makes no sense. Why are people jumping the line? If you put on a good show, you deserve the shot. Ankalaev's a really good example where he was specifically told, if you don't put a good show on, you ain't getting nothing. What are your thoughts on that whole hoopla?
Not a sport. Not a sport. First of all, the rankings are already controlled by the UFC. Who's doing the rankings? People the UFC gave the permission to do. And if they don't like the rankings, they're going to take it away, like they're threatening to do now. I think some of these sites they're like defunct. Do they even do any reporting or journalism anymore around the sport, or they just pick rankings? Like, it's a joke. It's not real. It's a big smoke and mirrors. The guy behind the curtain in Oz of what the rankings are. It's what the UFC wants, and the only reason he's bringing about switching it is probably because they've intended to switch it to something they have better control over for a while, and now they just are using whatever narrative to spin to justify it. Oh, we're going to save the rankings by using AI. Well, they're going to program the AI to do whatever they want. Absolutely. Like, this was made very clear to us in a fighter summit years ago, that a lot of our fights are determined and our ranks are determined, or they weren't ranked at the time, but our fights and our opportunities that they give us were based off of our Q score. Have you guys ever heard of a Q score before?
I haven't.
It's something that's used in the entertainment industry, right?
Yes.
Who has buzz? Who's got the most buzz? Who's the most buzzworthy? Who's Googled the most? Who has the most Google searches? I'm sure that social media has a big influence on that now too. So it goes to, like, who are people talking about, rather than who's winning, who's actually good, who's climbing the ranks because they beat somebody ranked higher than them. It all comes down to who's the most popular, which is pro wrestling. It's not a sport.
Absolutely appreciate it. Ozzy, over to you.
Yeah, kind of touched on it just a little bit before, but we've seen kind of, since you started fighting, everybody was kind of a fight fan, and now you see this new generation of fan. They're more UFC fans than they are fight fans.
Yep.
Did you kind of see that transition into that way while you were fighting? Like, people were fight fans and then they became UFC fans?
Yeah, go back and watch my old interviews. Like, I predicted this exactly. I said they're pushing pro wrestling. They're pushing a pro wrestling model. Like, we're going to get to the point where it doesn't matter who wins or loses or who's good. It's only going to be who makes the money. And that's not a sport. And I don't have a problem with circus fights. I don't have a problem with someone like Jake Paul doing what he does. if people want to watch those guys fight, I used to love watching the celebrity boxing matches back in the day. Who is that? The Matumbo and whoever was fighting boxing, Screech.
Right. Yep.
You know,
Refrigerator
Screech
Perry.
Saved by the Bell was
Something like
boxing
that.
somebody.
Yep.
Like, cool, like whatever.
Yep.
That's fun sometimes, but you can't let that take over the actual sport and the ranking system. Boxing gets a lot of heat, but like nowadays you get better cards and more of the premier matchups in boxing than you do in MMA. And boxing needs more mandatories. It needs a lot more mandatories in boxing, but otherwise it's a free market system. And if you don't like it, like you just don't like the free market system where the fighters actually have choice on who they want to fight because they are independent contractors. They are their own business. Like you can't force McDonald's to work with Wendy's. So like forcing two guys to fight together without making a deal that they both like it's hard to do. And that's just what it is. The only other option to have that free market system would be to have like 30, 40, 50 promoters come together and form an actual league, right? You have a lot of fake leagues, right? They have a lot of promotions who identify as leagues, but they're not leagues. You have to have multiple owners, multiple promotions together, right? But the promoters are so greedy, they'll never come together and do that.
Yeah, makes sense. Shall I jump in, guys?
Yeah, go Colin.
Sounds good. John, you were one of the original guys at AKA, you and Josh Koscheck, Mike Swick, Josh Thompson. However, when the guys started coming from the Eastern Bloc, Habib, you were there and you got a chance to train, I think, with Habib for a while. Am I right?
Yep. Yeah, we spent like 10 years training together.
That's what I was thinking. So Islam, probably also you put in some
Yep.
time with him.
Yep.
So let me ask you, these guys are still absolutely killing it. The interesting thing is they usually are not fighting each other, but then I guess that's why kill one giant when you want to have all the giants there available. They're finally talking about Merab fighting against Umar. I guess Umar would have been one of your teammates there. Did you ever get any looks from him? I know he was a smaller fighter.
Yeah, I've worked out with him. Usman also, probably more with Usman because he's a little bit bigger. But Umar has been around. They're solid, very very good. You know, and Umar's gotten a lot better in the past 4 years since I've been around and seen him. You know, but yeah, they're skilled. They know how to wrestle, and they have their own little flair they put on the fight game.
Yeah. Can you be unbiased since Umar was a teammate and let us know how he stacks up against Merab and how impressed were you with Merab in that Sean O'Malley fight? I guess as a wrestler, you probably figured it would go that way as well. But Merab looks like he is just a different animal, and he's just a compact, strong.
Merab is very tough. But I don't. He's stiff. I think would be the way I would say it. He's stiff compared to Usman, Umar. I mean,
Umar,
who is more fluid with his movement. I think he flows a lot more than Merab does.
And do you think either of them are trying to avoid each other? People are talking about that. They're having a war of words where they're not very happy with each other. And Merab is telling Umar, earn your way, to fight me. And I mean, I wouldn't think either guy is afraid of each other. I think people try to say that about professional fighters, but I don't think that's ever almost.
Merab sees an easy path to winning another fight in a big payday, and that's through Sean O'Malley. He already beat him once. He knows the recipe how to beat him. O'Malley's not going to get so good at takedown defense and getting up from bottom in that short period of time. So it's a smart business move is to rematch that guy, beat him, and get the pay-per-view points. Like, it's a money play. Why not do that? That's a smart thing to do. And then from there, he can take the tougher fight and Umar.
Makes sense. Appreciate that. Danny, let me throw it to you.
Yeah, so maybe just building on that, excuse me, John. I think you'd posted something on social media that it might take a wrestler to beat Topuria. So I'd love to get your thoughts on who might that be, and if he actually went up to face Islam. How do you see that going?
Yeah, that's the thing is I don't know if I can I don't know if I know any top wrestlers or guys who are really good wrestlers at that weight. Like, I don't know if I can even at 145 who actually wrestles. Like, it comes from
what do you think about the champ Ilia Topuria? I'm sorry to step on your words, John, but I'm not sure.
He's tough. He hits very hard. He's very competent. He looks like he knows how to wrestle a little bit. I just haven't seen him. We haven't seen him against a top tier competent wrestler. That's all.
I see what you were saying. Sorry, I stepped on your word. So
there's just a little mystery there, because he does change levels and he'll hit that double leg. He did. Who was it? Was it Bryce Mitchell? Didn't Bryce Mitchell take him down a little bit?
I think.
Yep.
Right, and Doug Nasty is a good submission guy, but I still don't know if he's like ADCC top caliber submission guy. And then I don't know if he's a D1 wrestler status. I don't know. He's competent for MMA, but it's not the same. And I don't know if there is anybody, because UFC just refuses to sign guys who know how to wrestle.
That's very good. Thank you, John. Ozzy?
Yeah, so we kind of touched on weight classes a little bit. You started at light heavyweight, right? Moved all the way down to 170. What do you think these days, where everybody's so well rounded, that extra 10 pounds moving up or whatever? Like you've obviously felt a lot of guys in the gym. Like, what's that? Just the 10 pounds and then 15 pounds or 20 pounds? Like, what's that difference when it comes to skill?
No, I think we need more weight classes. I think there needs to be more weight classes. I think we should, I'd hate to see it go, but I think the welterweight weight class needs to be to kind of 170 needs to be taken out and replaced with 165 and 175. And we should get, 100%. A 10-pound jump all the way up, so 55, 65, 75, 85, 95, 205. And then I would like to see something smaller than the heavyweight, something like a 225, because then we're going to cut out some of those guys who could fight at that 225 and do really well, but they're going to struggle against the guys who are 260, 270.
Oh, looks like we've lost Colin there. Absolutely. I love that you said that, because I've noticed with the new breed of heavyweights, they're quite lean, they're quite muscular, as distinct from some of the people we've seen before, like a Mark Hunt or something like that. I love that idea, because I think it would be very, very competitive at that level. I'm going to ask.
I think the sport has grown large enough to where there's enough guys to fill those weight classes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. Especially you kind of got, like, even in the UFC, maybe 600 plus fighters under contract at some stages during the career. During the year, there's definitely room for those weight classes. I guess it's more about, maybe controlling belts or champions. I don't know. It's probably less champions to deal with.
That's part of the class action lawsuit is they have said in their own emails, one of the reasons why they keep so many guys under contract is to tie them up, and that prevents other companies from signing them. It's like they sign people just to keep them off the market, which is absolutely horrible, because you have guys who don't fight. They'll fight once every 9 months, once a year. That you can't feed your family. You can't live fighting once a year, and they do it on purpose to make sure that other promoters don't sign them.
Yep, absolutely. I was going to ask you about that, John, because I had seen preliminary approval had come through on that lawsuit, which is an incredible step forward. This has been 10 years in the making. How does that make you feel, I guess, getting so close and starting to see some positive movement?
It's bittersweet for me, because it was never about money for me. It was about a sport. I wanted things to be a sport. I wanted there to be the focus be on sport, not a show, not pro wrestling. And because of the delays in the case, injunctive relief was removed from our class. It's still a part of the Johnson class, which is the second lawsuit, but our class isn't getting injunctive relief. So we're only recovering damages. I was smart with my money. I put it into good investments. I'm not doing bad. I fought smart. I didn't get brain damage like a lot of other guys did, because they believed the lie they were told in the locker room when Dana said, go out on your shield. We'll always take care of you. I was like, no, you're not. You're not going to take care of us. Like, that's a lie. I smell bullshit, 100% bullshit. So now you got a lot of guys who are suffering because they're like, wait a minute, you said you were going to always take care of us. So those guys need damages. Those guys need money. They need help. And I'm really happy that those guys are getting the help they need. It's also, hopefully wakes a lot of guys up to the fact that we can make change, and we do have strength together, and we can stand up to the UFC, and we can stand up to that monopoly.
Absolutely. No, I really appreciate that. So the second question I was going to ask, maybe is building on that, is you had referenced, you've been in multiple promotions. PFL, do you ever see that brand getting to a position where they could compete with the UFC?
There is not another major promotion who's profitable at all. I do not believe that any of these companies are even trying to compete with the UFC. I've seen emails that suggest as much, that they're not trying to compete. They can't come forward and say that publicly because they have to get investors to give them money. And if you're like, oh, well, we're number two, we're never going to compete with them, you're not going to get the money. So you have to tell a good story that you're actually going to compete. I also think that, you know, there's rumors that One Championship is making its money through laundering money for drug cartels, you know? So, and you have to understand, like one of the reasons why MMA is so popular and got popular and put on TV isn't just because, you know, mainstream embraced it. It's because the low overhead it takes to run a live event, because you don't have to pay the athletes anything, right? You pay them very, very poorly, and you are able to put on live events. And the only way to get people to sit down and watch commercials and watch advertising is to put on live events. So MMA is the cheapest way to get people to watch commercials. It's the cheapest way to do advertising. And now you have this huge influx of gambling money, right? Everybody's got a special section that they take time during the show to talk about the fights and the bets and gambling. So a lot of these promotions they're just making money to pay themselves. They're not actually trying to grow their promotion. They're not trying to take on the UFC in any way. They're trying to just carve out a little bit of the market to line their own pockets. And if the fighters get chewed up in the process, so be it. That's
a really amazing insight and analysis. Thank you, Ozzy.
That's very interesting, John. Like you were saying about the gambling, it's so gambling orientated now. Even on the Dana White Contender Series, you have paid employees telling you their betting suggestions and things like that, live odds during the fights, things like that.
That's wild. And you have no law or rule against anybody who's associated with those promotions gambling. Like, they're all allowed to gamble. All the commentators, like all the cutmen, the suits in the back, you know, everybody else can gamble. The fighters can't. That's not allowed anymore, that until very recently. And you have these guys going into the UFC PI, right? Performance Institute. Well, they're taking in your VO2 max, your bench, your squat. Like, they're recording all of this performance based stuff. Where does that data go? Who are they selling that data to? Are they selling them to the bookies? Are they using it themselves to place bets? Are they matching up guys themselves that they think are going to be leveraged to beat this guy? This guy is weak here, so we can match him against this guy, and we can get this virtually almost guaranteed outcome. And then they're betting on it. Like, there's so much stuff happening behind the scenes. We have no idea.
Yeah, makes sense. Let me jump in with one, guys. Daniel Cormier is probably someone you got some looks from back in the day, right?
Little bit. He was on the bigger side, so I try to avoid the bigger guys when I can.
For sure. What's your thought about where he stands among the all-time greats, and then what's your thought about how he's doing as a commentator? It seems like people either love him or hate him.
Man, I try not to listen to the commentating too much, because it all sounds the same. It sounds very PR-ish. It sounds like it was pre-written a lot of times. And a lot of these guys, they don't sound genuine. It doesn't sound like they're genuinely saying the things they're saying about this stuff, because they say the same things about everyone. And to me, it's like when you play a fighting game, like there's a boxing game that used to have, like, you could pick your nickname, and the announcer would have these standardized things they would say, and just insert your nickname. It sounds like that a lot of times, you know? So I don't know. I try not to listen, honestly. But DC, he's up there with one of the best ever. But at the same time, like, ever since 2010, in my opinion, I think everybody gets an asterisk, because the UFC has so heavily leveraged everything. All of the fights, all the title shots, all of the progression to titles, who they signed, who they promoted, who they talked smack about and didn't like and said were terrible. Just look at how, Jose Aldo got injured a little bit and they turned on him and he was the greatest and then he was the worst, So because of the monopoly that they've formed, there's an asterisk because I don't know, look how many drug tests, how many drug violations they covered up. Mark Hunt is still trying to pursue legal redemption or what, I don't know what you call it. Legal justice, trying to seek justice for being lied to, having to fight Brock Lesnar while he was hot. He failed his test. The UFC's done it multiple times, gotten caught. How many times have they done it and not gotten caught?
Yeah, without a doubt. Speaking of that, you probably may know that USADA was partnered with UFC for a while and was testing fighters. I think it's been a year or more since they've been gone. And if you look at the fighters, a lot of fighters are looking really jacked. Is that kind of clear to you as well? Or
and it's the case of the haves versus the have-nots. There's plenty of guys who I think they were covering up for before with USADA. Just because they're testing people a lot, what are they doing with the test? I remember there's the American Gladiator. There's not a reality show, but there's a documentary about the American Gladiator. And they're talking about how they started testing everybody. And they talked about how much they were testing guys. Well, they were testing them, but they weren't actually going through with the test or reporting them failing any tests. So you can say you're testing people. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. We heard some of the strangest tests, people getting Nick Diaz 4-year suspensions for marijuana and things like this. And, that kind of stuff is kind of not as important anymore. They're not too worried about that. But I remember people talking about even a certain amount of caffeine you couldn't have in your system and things like that, to the point where, you hear that some of these tests are just IQ tests, and it's just kind of strange now with the, everyone's saying with the less knockouts and other people saying, well, it's because USADA's gone and these guys can take a lot more damage than they used to be able to take. So, what's your thought on that?
Possibly. I mean, I think that when you have top-down control and you have the amount of power that the UFC has, it's a form of regulatory capture. The commissions bow down to what the UFC does and says because they'll threaten them and say, hey, if you don't let us do what we want to do, we're not doing shows in your state. And that's going to take away millions of dollars of revenue from those commissions.
For sure. Let me ask one last thing really quick, John. How can we, and I know these guys were your teammates from Dagestan and Chechnya and Kazakhstan, these killers that grew up in the Eastern Bloc Sambo system, but can we take guys like Bo Nickel and other American wrestlers and get them to where they can compete with these guys? And the second part of that is, can Bo Nickel be that guy that can compete with these guys?
It's possible. It's possible. One of the things that we are deficient in is the fact that these guys are training MMA from a young age, and with the combat sambo style, they're learning how to wrestle straight up, and then they're also learning the stand-up stuff at the same time. And a lot of guys, we compartmentalize everything so much here. Guys are only wrestling and then only doing jiu-jitsu and then only doing stand-up, and then they get to a point where they're about ready to become pro and they start mixing everything together rather than doing it their whole life like these guys are. So it is kind of playing catch up. We don't have a good amateur system. We don't have a good feeder system into the pros. I think until that happens, I honestly think we should adopt combat sambo nationally as an amateur feeding system. I think it runs better. It's smoother. We can run it across the board nationally rather than state by state. Our fighters will have a better development towards becoming pros.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, John, since retirement, you've been doing a lot of coaching. I've been onto your website and checked everything out. If you could give any advice, I guess, to fighters who are starting out in the career with all of that knowledge and hindsight that you have, what would it be? You got to have a little bit of everything.
you know, but especially with, I hate to say it, but like nowadays you have to build your own notoriety yourself. You have to promote yourself because the promoters don't do it for you. The promoters don't promote you. The promoters use your notoriety, your name to promote themselves, right? They're not going to build you up. They need you to build yourself up, and they will use you to build up their brand. So you're going to have to take some care in building up your online persona. You're going to have your social media kicking. You're going to have things that you're are putting out there to alert people to who you are and let people know who you are. That way, the promoter can't control it. You know, they can't diminish you. That you can have your own base of fans that follow you for you. And that's becoming as important now as your fight skill, which I don't like, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, I agree. And I think just building on what you said earlier, looking at Dana White's Contender Series, Tough, like that's all about building the brands, because they're the ones, even if they don't win, they're still getting contracts, right? And they've already got that social media platform that they can bounce straight in. So
yeah,
that's really great insight.
Now, and then people want to, you know, badmouth boxing, but boxing, it's going to affect your paydays.
Yeah.
But if you win your amateur fights, Golden Gloves, all the way up to Olympics, like you win that, and then you have notoriety from winning, and then you go pro, and then you win and beat guys who are more ranked than you. You get local titles, you get a little bit bigger regional titles, and you use those titles to build up your notoriety. And those titles and higher ranking and fighting higher ranking guys, that's what builds you up, and that's what a sport should be like, rather than just, you know, the Jake Paul route.
Exactly. So it's all based on meritocracy. Absolutely.
Yes. There's a serious battle, I think, against meritocracy in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, 100% agree. It's the way the world's going, unfortunately. It's a bit scary. All right, Aussie Fight Fan, final question from yourself.
Yeah, just final question, John. I was just wondering, what's the biggest change you wanted to make with the? I guess we're trying to incorporate the Ali Act. If you could bring any one thing in that would change the MMA industry now, what would it be?
One simple change that would change everything is 1-year contracts. No matter what, so 1 year of contract. So if a fighter is unhappy with the promoter, he can take a seat, just like Francis Ngannou did. And now the promotions all have to actually bid on guys. Now it's a more even playing field. The promoters will moan and complain, oh, we got to renegotiate every single contract. Yes. Yeah, you're going to have to do that, because the way you're strong arming people now today, it's not good. It's not cool. And it's not just UFC that does that. There's a lot of guys, you know, like that's why I left the PFL. They breached contract. They were supposed to give me and offer me a fight every 6 months. They didn't. I said, pay me, give me the fight, or release me. And they said, where are you going to go? And it's just a smack in the face. And I think every fighter should have the right to be able to find a new promoter. Promoters are service providers. They provide the service of promoting you and letting people know who you are and hosting the fight. So if I don't like my service provider, just like my cell phone, I can get a new service provider. I shouldn't be cemented in with them forever. And they have a lot of contracts from the UFC that don't end.
Yeah, that's so true. Especially with the young ones these days who probably have no idea of the terms and conditions and what they're actually signing up for, right? And anybody's going to come along and give them bad advice because they're going to get a cut of it. I love that idea because it forces, as you say, that even playing ground. It's very important. Some of these poor fighters don't even make much money out of this and will end up injured. And then what's next? Then they're trying to transition into a new life, which can be quite challenging, I suspect.
Yeah. And you're 35, 40 years old, trying to start a career in something else. That's not exactly easy.
No, definitely not. Now, Colin, I'm not sure if you're there or not. I think your screen's playing up.
It's got a bad signal.
Yeah, I might just drop that. But look, thank you so much for your time today, John. How can we support you and follow you? So can you give us a shout out?
Yeah, just go to jonfitch.net. You can sign up for my newsletter. I haven't sent out for a little bit. But Jon Fitch Smash on Instagram, official Jon Fitch on YouTube. Sunday nights I do a podcast, Jon Fitch Knows Nothing. when I get off of this, I'm going to get prepped and do my podcast here in about 24 minutes. And you can reach out for me. I do seminars. I travel for seminars. So you guys can reach out and see when I'm available. I'm starting to book my 2025 schedule. I got one. I'm almost booked, getting there. And I've got a few more seminars coming up the rest of the end of this year.
Excellent. That's amazing. So everybody who's listening, please hit that up and follow Jon. Thank you again for all of your time. Really appreciate it. And keep killing it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jon. Great to talk to you, mate.